Hello everyone. I hope you enjoy listening to the story. My name is Emily Carter and I am 30 years old. I was locked out of my own house the night before my final exam because I ranked second in my class. 15 years later, those same parents were kneeling outside my office, begging for funding, without realizing I was the one deciding the future of their school. I stand behind the glass wall of my office and watch them through the reflection of polished floors. My hands are steady but my chest feels tight, like something old is trying to crawl back to life. They look smaller than I remember, older too. But the posture is the same, pride bent only when necessary. They do not recognize me. To them I am just another official. Another gatekeeper holding their request in a folder on my desk. They believe this is about funding, about numbers, about opportunity. They have no idea this moment began on a cold night 15 years ago, when they locked Emily Carter out and never opened the door. I close my eyes for a second and I am back there, standing outside our house with my backpack at my feet. The air had that sharp bite that makes your lungs ache every time you breathe. I remember knocking once, then again, then harder. My knuckles went numb before anyone opened the door. No one ever did. The lights were on. I could hear voices inside, low and controlled, like a meeting I was not invited to. I called out, my voice cracking, but all I got back was silence. Then my mother spoke through the door. Her voice was calm, almost bored. Come back when you learn how to win. I did not cry right away. That came later, after the cold settled into my bones, after the truth finally landed. In that moment, Emily Carter was not their child. I was a result and I had failed it. I open my eyes and look at them again, kneeling in the hallway outside my office, waiting for a decision they think is about money. They do not know I have already decided something else entirely. I do not call security. I do not speak. I let the silence stretch, because what they took from me was never just a door. It was a childhood. A sense of safety. A belief that love did not need conditions. I tap my pen once against the desk and watch them flinch slightly. Even now they respond to pressure the way they trained me to. And for the first time I wonder, not if I will help them, but how long I will let them wait before they understand who is standing on the other side of the door. Because the truth is they are about to learn something they never taught me. Mercy without control. Regret without pride. And the cost of measuring a human life by a single number. I lean back in my chair, slow my breathing, and finally reach for the file that holds their future. My name is printed at the top of every page. Emily Carter. They just haven't seen it yet. I stopped knocking after that night. That is the part people never understand when they hear my story. They imagine tears, begging, maybe a second chance if I had just apologized harder. But something inside Emily Carter went quiet instead. I picked up my backpack when the sun came up, my fingers stiff and cracked from the cold, and I walked away without looking back. I did not leave a note. I did not call anyone. I just disappeared from the version of my life they controlled. The next weeks were not dramatic. They were small and brutal in a different way. I slept in a school library one night, in a 24-hour diner booth the next, pretending I was studying so no one would ask questions. I learned quickly how to exist without being noticed. Teachers thought I was dedicated. Classmates thought I was intense. No one knew that Emily Carter was counting coins just to buy coffee so I could sit somewhere warm. The exam came and went like a blur. I remember sitting there staring at the paper, realizing that this test no longer had the power it used to. I still finished near the top. Not first, not perfect, but enough to earn a scholarship that became my exit. College was not freedom the way people imagine. It was survival with better lighting. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Stacking shifts between classes until my body moved on habit instead of energy. I cleaned classrooms at night, served coffee before sunrise, and studied in the gaps between exhaustion. I did not call home. They did not call me. It was like we had all agreed to erase each other. But the silence gave me something I had never had before. Space to think without their voices shaping every thought. That was when I started noticing patterns. Not just in my life, but in the system around me. The same pressure that pushed my parents to lock me out was built into everything. Rankings, metrics, labels, constant comparison. Students were numbers before they were people. Teachers were evaluated by outcomes they could not fully control. Schools chased performance like it was oxygen. I sat in lecture halls listening to professors talk about policy and equity, and I kept thinking about that door. About how easy it was for adults to justify cruelty when the system rewarded results over humanity. That realization did something dangerous. It made me angry, but it also made me focused. If the system could shape people like my parents, then changing the system meant changing everything. I shifted my path without telling anyone. I moved from pure academics into education policy, into research that looked at how funding decisions influenced behavior at every level. My professors noticed. One of them pulled me aside after class and asked why I worked like I was running out of time. I did not tell him about the night outside the house. I just said I did not plan on failing again. He recommended me for an internship at a small policy group. The kind that writes reports no one reads until they suddenly matter. That was my first real step into power, even if it did not feel like it at the time. I spent months analyzing data, tracing how money moved through districts, how incentives quietly shaped decisions that affected thousands of students. It was not glamorous work, but it was precise, and precision became my weapon. Years passed like that, each one building on the last. I learned how to speak in rooms where no one expected me to have authority. I learned when to stay silent and when to ask the one question that made everyone uncomfortable. I built a reputation for being calm under pressure, for making decisions based on data instead of emotion. People started trusting me with bigger responsibilities, larger budgets, more influence. Eventually, I joined a national education fund, the kind that decides which schools get resources and which ones get left behind. That was when I understood the full weight of what I had become. I was no longer reacting to a system. I was part of the mechanism that shaped it. The first time I saw the name of my old school on a funding list, my breath caught in a way I had not felt in years. It was just a line on a document, a request among dozens, but it pulled something sharp and familiar out of me. I clicked into the file and read everything: performance metrics, leadership structure, parent involvement. And then I saw their names. My mother listed as part of the Parent Leadership Committee. My father supporting outreach programs. The same people who had reduced me to a number were now advocating for student success like they understood what that meant. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen for a long time, letting the irony settle. They had not changed the system. They had adapted to it, learned how to speak its language without ever questioning its damage. I did not act right away. That was the difference between who I was then and who I had become. I gathered information. I reviewed reports, observed patterns, spoke to people who worked in that district. I learned that the pressure culture had not disappeared, it had simply been refined. Students still competed for ranking, still carried the same quiet fear of failure that had defined my childhood. The difference was that now it was wrapped in better language, framed as excellence instead of control. That was when the idea formed, not as revenge in the way people imagine, but as correction. If I was going to intervene, it had to be precise, undeniable, and public enough to force change. So I scheduled the review meeting. I approved the request for them to present their case in person, knowing exactly who would show up and what they would say. I built the framework for evaluation carefully, embedding questions that would expose the gap between their claims and reality. I made sure the decision would not rest on emotion but on standards they could not easily manipulate. By the time they walked into my office today, I was already 2 steps ahead. They thought they were here to secure funding. They did not realize they were stepping into a moment that would force them to confront everything they had chosen to ignore. And as I sit here now, watching them wait outside my door, I understand something with absolute clarity. This was never about getting even. It was about making sure no one else had to sit outside in the cold and wonder if they were only worth something when they were perfect. I finally open the door and call them in. They stand up too quickly, like they are afraid the opportunity might disappear if they move too slowly. My mother steps in first, her posture straight, her smile practiced. The same expression she used at every school event when appearances mattered more than truth. My father follows half a step behind, quieter, eyes scanning the room as if trying to measure my authority before deciding how much respect to show. They sit across from me, hands folded, voices polite. They still do not recognize me. Not my face, not my name on the folder. not the voice that once begged outside their door. To them I am just another official who needs to be convinced. I let the silence sit for a moment, long enough for discomfort to creep in, then I nod for them to begin. They launch into their presentation with confidence. My mother speaks about academic excellence, about discipline, about maintaining high standards in a competitive environment. She uses words like resilience, accountability, achievement. My father adds details about community involvement, about preparing students for real-world challenges, about ensuring no one falls behind. I watch them carefully, not just what they say but how they say it. The certainty, the ease, the complete absence of doubt. It is almost impressive. If I did not know better, I might believe them. But I do know better, and that knowledge sits heavy in my chest. When they finish, I flip a page in the file and lean forward slightly. I ask my first question in a calm, neutral tone. What happens when a student fails once? My mother answers immediately, almost rehearsed. We provide guidance, we encourage improvement, we push them to do better. Failure is part of growth. My father nods in agreement, adding that accountability builds character. I tap my pen once, letting their words settle in the air. Then I ask again, slower this time. What happens when that student does not meet your expectations again? There is a slight pause now, just a fraction of a second, but I catch it. My mother adjusts her posture before answering. Then we increase support. We set stricter goals. We make sure they understand the consequences of underperformance. I let the silence stretch again. I can feel something shifting, not in them yet, but in the room. The weight of the conversation is changing. I close the folder gently and rest my hands on top of it. Then I begin to speak, not as an official, not as a decision maker, but as someone telling a story. I describe a student who worked as hard as they could, who stayed up late studying, who believed that being second best was still something to be proud of. I describe the day that student brought home their results, the moment they realized it was not enough. My voice stays steady, controlled, but every word is precise. I describe the door, the cold, the silence on the other side. I describe the feeling of sitting outside all night, not knowing if anyone would come back for you. I stop there and look at them. For the first time, they are not relaxed. My mother's smile has faded, replaced by something tighter, uncertain. My father's hands are no longer still. He shifts slightly in his seat, like he is trying to place something he cannot quite reach. I let a few seconds pass, then I say the words that have been waiting 15 years to be spoken. That student was me. The reaction is immediate and unmistakable. My mother's face drains of color, her lips parting without sound. My father leans back as if the distance might protect him from what he is hearing. Recognition hits them slowly but completely, like a wave they cannot step away from. They look at me again, really look this time, searching for the child they left behind in the person sitting across from them. I hold their gaze without flinching. Neither of them speaks at first. Then my mother tries, her voice unsteady, reaching for something that sounds like control but comes out as confusion. She says my name, not as a statement but as a question. I do not answer it. I do not need to. The truth is already sitting between us, heavier than anything else in the room. My father starts to say something about misunderstanding, about pressure, about wanting the best for me. But the words fall apart before they can form into anything meaningful. I open the folder again and slide a document across the table. My voice is calm, almost detached. This is the funding decision. I explain the terms clearly, each condition precise and unavoidable. The school will receive support, but only if specific reforms are implemented. Leadership structures must change. Evaluation systems must shift away from ranking obsession. Policies must be introduced to protect students from extreme academic pressure. Parent committees will be restructured. Current leadership will be reviewed and replaced where necessary. I do not raise my voice. I do not accuse. I simply state what will happen. They read the document in silence. I watch as understanding settles in, not just about me but about what they are losing. This is not a punishment in the way they expected. I'm not taking everything away. I'm taking away their control. My mother looks up first, her composure completely gone now. She asks if this is personal, if this is about what happened. I meet her eyes and shake my head slightly. It is about making sure it never happens again. That is when they break. The confidence, the structure, the careful presentation all collapse at once. My father's voice drops, softer than I have ever heard it, asking for another chance, for understanding, for forgiveness. My mother reaches across the table slightly, stopping herself before her hand gets too close. They are no longer presenting. They are pleading. I let them speak, but I do not interrupt and I do not agree. When they finish, I close the folder for the last time and stand. The meeting is over. The decision is final. I tell them they can leave. They hesitate as if waiting for something more, some sign that this can still be undone. I give them nothing. As they walk out of the office, slower now, smaller than when they walked in, I feel the weight inside my chest shift. Not disappear, not resolve, but change. I did not destroy them. I did not raise my voice or take revenge in the way they might have expected. I removed their ability to hurt others the way they hurt me. And as the door closes behind them, I realize something I did not expect. Forgiveness was never the point. The office feels quieter after they leave, but not empty. Their presence lingers like a pressure that has not fully released, like a door that has been shut but not sealed. I stand there for a moment longer than necessary, staring at the closed door, replaying the look in their eyes when recognition finally settled in. It was not just shock. It was something deeper, something closer to fear. Not fear of me, but fear of what they had done and how little control they had left to fix it. I walk back to my desk slowly, each step measured, each breath steady. The file is still there, their names printed neatly across the top. Reduced to ink and policy after years of shaping my life without realizing it. I sit down and run my fingers along the edge of the paper, not out of hesitation but out of habit, grounding myself in something physical before making the next move. The decision I made in that room does not end with them. That is the part that matters. Within hours, the policy changes begin to move through the system. Emails are sent, committees are notified, review boards are assembled. The language is formal, structured, impossible to argue with because it is built on the same framework they once used to justify everything. Performance metrics adjusted. Student support guidelines rewritten. Parent leadership roles redefined. It is not dramatic from the outside. There are no raised voices, no public confrontation, no visible collapse. But beneath the surface, everything shifts. The culture they helped maintain starts to unravel, thread by thread, replaced by something slower, more deliberate, more human. I attend the follow-up meeting with the district a week later, not as someone seeking closure, but as someone ensuring the process holds. New administrators are already stepping in. People who understand that discipline does not have to come at the cost of dignity. Teachers speak more openly now, carefully at first, then with growing confidence, about the pressure students have been under. Data begins to reflect what I already knew. Burnout rates decrease. Participation increases. It is not perfect, but it is movement, and movement is what matters. I listen more than I speak, offering guidance only when necessary, keeping my tone neutral, my presence controlled. This is not about proving anything anymore. It is about making sure the change lasts. I see them again briefly at the edge of that same meeting. They are no longer at the center of the room. They are not speaking, not leading, not shaping the conversation. They sit quietly, observing, their roles reduced to something smaller, something they are still trying to understand. My mother avoids my gaze at first, then looks up when she realizes I am there. There is no performance in her expression this time, no practiced confidence. Just uncertainty and something that might be regret. My father nods slightly, a gesture that feels heavier than any apology he could offer. I do not approach them. There is nothing left to say in that setting. Words would only complicate what has already been made clear. Later that evening, as I leave the building, I find them waiting outside. Not kneeling this time, not performing desperation, just standing there in the fading light. As if unsure whether they have the right to stop me. I pause a few steps away, giving them the space to decide if they will speak. My mother does first, her voice quieter than I have ever heard it, stripped of the certainty that once defined her. She says she is sorry. Not in the way people say it to resolve a situation quickly, but slowly, carefully, as if each word costs something real. She does not try to justify what happened. She does not mention pressure or expectations. He just says she is sorry. My father follows, his words fewer, his tone heavier, acknowledging that they were wrong, that they did not understand the damage they caused. I listen without interrupting, not because I need to hear it, but because this moment belongs to them as much as it does to me. When they finish, the silence that follows is different from the one in my office. It is not heavy with control or tension. It is open, uncertain, waiting. I take a breath and choose my words with the same precision I have used for everything else. I tell them I hear them. I tell them that what they did cannot be undone, not by apology, not by regret, not by time. I do not raise my voice. I do not accuse. I simply state the truth the way it exists now. Then I tell them something else. I'm not interested in revenge. I never was. What I needed was to make sure no one else had to go through what I did. They nod, both of them absorbing the words in a way that feels slower, more real. There is no request for forgiveness this time. No attempt to close the gap with a single conversation. They understand finally that some things do not resolve neatly. That some distances cannot be crossed by intention alone. We stand there for a moment longer. Three people connected by a past that no longer controls the present in the same way. Then I step back, creating a clear line between where they are and where I am going. I wish them well, not as a gesture of reconciliation but as a boundary. A recognition that our lives are no longer tied in the way they once were. As I walk away, I do not look back. Not because I am avoiding them, but because I no longer need to check if they are still there. The part of me that waited outside that door, hoping it would open, has finally been answered. Not with warmth or comfort, but with something stronger. Clarity. I get into my car, sit for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, and let the quiet settle in fully this time. There is no rush of triumph, no overwhelming sense of victory. Just a steady calm. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you chose to become. The next morning, I return to work like any other day. New files, new decisions, new schools waiting for support or change. The system continues, complex and imperfect, but no longer untouched. Somewhere in that network, a student will fail once and not be cast aside for it. Somewhere, a door will stay open when it matters most. That is enough. I do not need anything more from the past to move forward. And as I sit down at my desk, reviewing the next case, I realize something that feels almost unexpected in its simplicity. I did not just survive what happened to me. I changed what it meant. The changes at the school continue long after that meeting. Not in dramatic headlines or public announcements, but in quieter ways that matter more. Policies shift, language evolves. And slowly the culture begins to loosen its grip on perfection as the only measure of worth. I visit once, months later, not as a former student returning to confront ghosts, but as an observer ensuring the structure holds. The building looks the same from the outside, the same brick walls. The same front steps where parents once gathered to compare scores and futures like they were currency. But inside something feels different. There is less tension in the hallways, less urgency in the way students move. Like they are no longer racing an invisible clock. I stop near a classroom and watch through the glass as a teacher kneels beside a student, speaking quietly, patiently. The student nods, not in fear but in understanding. That small moment does more than any report ever could. Tells me the shift is real. I do not announce who I am. I do not need recognition here. The work was never about reclaiming a place in this building. It was about changing what this place does to people. As I walk through the corridor, I pass a bulletin board filled with student projects, not ranked, not labeled as best or worst, just displayed. For a second, I imagine what it would have felt like to see something like that when I was younger. To know that effort could exist without comparison. The thought lingers not as regret but as perspective. I cannot change what I experienced, but I can change what comes after. Later that day I receive a message. It is from my father. The words are simple, not polished, not rehearsed. He tells me they have stepped down completely. That they are trying to understand what it means to support something without controlling it. There is no request in the message, no expectation of response. Just information offered without pressure. I read it once, then set my phone aside. For a long time I do nothing. Not because I am conflicted, but because I am no longer reacting. That is the difference now. I choose when to engage, when to respond, when to let silence exist without needing to fill it. That evening, I sit by the window in my apartment, the city lights stretching out in front of me, steady and distant. I think about the version of myself who sat outside that locked door, trying to understand why being second was not enough. I think about how small the world felt then, how everything depended on approval that could be taken away in a single moment. And I compare it to now, to the quiet control I hold over my own life, over decisions that affect more than just me. The contrast is not sharp or painful anymore. It is clear. I do not hate them. That surprises me more than anything else. The anger that once felt permanent has thinned into something quieter, something that no longer demands action. What remains is understanding, not as an excuse but as context. They were shaped by a system that rewarded harshness and called it discipline. I was shaped by surviving it, and now I have the ability to reshape it for others. That is where my focus stays. Before I go to bed, I glance once more at the documents on my desk. New cases waiting, new decisions to be made. Each one carries weight, each one a chance to reinforce or undo the changes already in motion. I sit down, open the next file, and begin again. Not as someone trying to prove anything, not as someone seeking closure, but as someone who understands exactly what is at stake. Somewhere, a student will face failure for the first time. Somewhere, a parent will decide how to respond. And because of what I have done, because of what I chose not to repeat, that moment might unfold differently. If you were that student standing outside a door that refused to open, would you still believe you were the problem? Or would you walk away and build something stronger than the place that rejected you? I did not get the ending I once imagined. There was no apology that erased the past, no moment that gave me back what I lost. But I gained something stronger. I became the person who decides whether doors stay open or close on someone else. And that is enough. Because in the end, success is not about being first or perfect or approved by people who only love conditions. It is about becoming someone who never repeats the same cruelty. So let me ask you this. If the people who hurt you came back one day, would you forgive them or would you change the system that created them? If this story made you feel something, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one.